My Sunshine by Tanith Lee. Originally published in an anthology called Chrysalis 8 in December 1980, republished in a collection of short stories by the author entitled Women as Demons in 1989, and another in 2013 called Space is Just a Starry Night. Read by Daryl T. Smith II for my channel, Quasar Spectra. You are my sunshine. Tape running. For the record, Day 2, Session 2, Code Tape 3, Earth Central investigation into the disaster of the SSG Pilgrim. Executive Interrogator Hoffman presiding. Witness attending, Leon Canna, 5th Officer, PL capacity. Officer Canna being the only surviving crew member of the Pilgrim. Officer Canna? Yes, sir. Officer Canna, how long have you been in the service? 10 years, sir. That would be 3 years service in exploration vessels and 7 in the transport and passenger class. How many of those 7 years with Solarine galleons? 6 years, sir. And so you would know this type of ship pretty well? Yes, sir, pretty well. And was the Pilgrim in any way an unusual ship of its kind? No, sir. Officer Canna, I'm aware you've been through a lot, and I'm aware your previous record is not only clear but indeed meritorious. Naturally, I've read your written account of what, according to you, transpired aboard the Solarine Space Galleon Pilgrim. You and I, Officer Canna, both know that with any ship of any class or type, occasionally something can go wrong, even so wrong as to precipitate a tragedy of the magnitude of the Pilgrim disaster. Now, I want you to consider carefully before you answer me, of all the explanations you could have chosen for the death of this ship and the loss of the 2,020 lives that went with her, why this one? It's the truth, sir. Wait a moment, Officer Canna, please. You seem to miss my point. Of all the explanations at your disposal, and with 10 years' intimate knowledge of space, the explanation you offer us is, nevertheless, frankly ludicrous. Sir, it throws suspicion on you, Officer Canna. It blots your record. I can't help it, sir. Oh, sure, I could lie to you. Yes, Officer Canna, you could. But I'm not lying. Suppose I never told you this because I was afraid of how it would reflect on me. And then suppose the same situation comes up somewhere out there, and then the same thing happens again. That seems quite unlikely, Officer Canna. A murmur of laughter. Excuse me, but I don't think this thing should be played for laughs. Nor do I, Officer Canna, nor do I. Very well, in your own words, please, and at your own pace. Tell this investigation what you say you believe occurred. The girl came aboard from the subport at Bell. There were 38 passengers coming on at that stop, but Canna noticed the girl almost at once. The reason he noticed her was that she was so damned unnoticeable. Her clothes were the color of putty, and so was her hair. She had that odd, slack, round-shouldered stance that looked as though it came from a lifetime of sitting on her poor little ass, leaning forward over a computer console or a dispensary plate. Nobody had ever told her there were machines to straighten you out and fine you down, and vitamins to brighten your skin, and tints to color your hair, and optic inducers to stop your having to peer through 2 god-awful lenses wedged in a red groove at the top of your nose. Nobody had ever presumably told her she was human either, with a brain, a soul, and a gender. Watch it, Canna. A lost cause is lost. Leave it alone. Trouble was, it was part of his job to get involved. PL, passenger link, required acting as unofficial father, son, and brother to the whole shipload. Sometimes you got to be priest-confessor and sometimes lover, too. It took just the right blend of gregariousness coupled to the right blend of constraint. Long ago, the ships of the line had reasoned that passengers, the bread-winning live cargo that took up half the room aboard a Solarine galleon, were liable to run amok without an intermediary between themselves and the crewing personnel topside. The role of PL was therefore created. Spokesman and arbiter, the PL officer knew the technical bias up top, but he represented the voice of the non-technical flock lower side. He related to his flock what went on behind the firmly closed doors of the bridge and engine bay. If he sometimes edited, he took care not to admit it. He belonged, ostensibly, to the civilians, and that way he stopped them rocking the boat. To do this job at all, you had to be able to communicate with your fellow mortals, and they had to be able to communicate with you. In that department, Canna did excellently, sometimes better than excellently. Dark, deeply suntanned, as were all Solarines, and with a buoyant, lightly sardonic good humor, he had found early on that women liked him very well, sometimes too well. This had been one of the score of reasons that had driven him off the exploration vessels, where for 1 or 2 years at a stretch you rubbed shoulders with all the same stale passions and allergies. The EVs took on no passengers to provide diversions, stimulus, and, in the most harmless of ways, fair game. Conversely, the Solarines had a low percentage of female crew. Since women had realized their intellectual potency, they tended to go after the big-scale jobs, which pleasure cruisers didn't offer. However, the passengers provided plenty of female scenery, women who came and went, the nicest kind. For the rest, the grouses of transient passengers Canna could easily stand because next stop the grousers got off. Canna's trick was that he found it easy to be patient, appreciative, and kind with all birds of passage. So there was that little gray dab of a girl no one had ever been kind to, creeping into the great golden spaceship. Canna reminded himself of the story of the man who would go up to drab women on the street and hiss suddenly to them, "You're beautiful," for the strange ego trip of seeing the dull face abruptly flare into a kindling of brief, surprised loveliness, the magic a woman would find in herself with the aid of a man. Watch it, Canna. There were 2-day periods and a sun park of 20 before they turned for Lyra and this live cargo got off. SSGs operated, as implied, on stored solar power. Their original function was transport, and with a meton reactor geared into the solar drive, they had been the hot rods of the galaxy. The big suns, any of a variety of rainbow dwarfs, provided gas stations for these trucks. Parked in orbit around the furnace, shields up and Solarine mechanisms gulping, the truck became a holiday camp. The beneficial side effects of SSGs were swiftly noted. Golden-skinned crews, whose resistance to disease was 99 to 100%, gave rise to new ideas of the purpose of the galleons. Something about the Solarine filter of raw sunlight acted like a miracle drug on the tired cells of human geography. Something did you a world of good, and you might be expected to pay through the nose to get it. From transport trucks, SSGs became the luxury liners of the firmament, health cures, journeys of a lifetime, the only way to travel. The Solarina sundecks were built on, the huge golden bubbles that girdled the ships, wonderlands of glowing pools, root-ballasted palms and giant sunflowers, lizardia blooms and liliaceous cacti, through which poured the screened radiance of whichever sun the ship was roosting over, endless summer on a leash. The sun between Bell and Lyra was a beta-class topaz effulgence, a carousel of fire. The third period after liftoff, the day they settled around the sun, the little gray putty girl was sitting in the sun lounge that opened off the entry outs of the Solarina. Not sitting precisely, more crouching. Canna had checked her name on the passenger list. Her name was Hartley, Apollonia Hartley. He had guessed it all in a flash of intuition, though if he was right, he never found out. The guess was someone had died and left her some cash, enough to make a trip someplace, and someone else had said to her, "Gee, Apollonia, honey, with your name you have to have a Solarine cruise." Apollo's daughter, child of a sun god, they must have maliciously predicted she'd turn out this plane to crucify her with a name like that, could bask in the sun under the ballasted ballsy palms and fry her grayness golden. Except that she wasn't doing that at all. She was sitting crouching here in the lead-off lounge with a tiny glass of Champazira she wasn't even sipping. A few people were going in and out, not many. Most of them were placed to grill like tacos within the outer side bubble. "Hi, Miss Hartley," said Canna, strolling up to her. "Everything okay?" Apollonia jumped about 10 centimeters off her couch and almost knocked her Champazira over. "All right, thank you," she muttered, staring at her knees. It was a formula. It meant, "Please go away, I'm afraid to talk to you." That was a professional slight, if nothing else. People had to want to talk to Leon Canna. It was what he was there for. "Had enough of the Solarina for today?" he asked. "Oh, yes, that is... yes," said Apollonia. She must be seeing something about her knees which no one but she ever would. He sat on the arm of the couch beside her. "You haven't been out there at all, have you?" Silence, which meant go away, go away. "Why's that?" Silence, which had become an abstract agony. "Maybe you've got sun fright. Is that it? It's quite common. Fears of strong radiation, but I can assure you, Miss Hartley, it's absolutely safe. Do I look sick, Miss Hartley?" Inadvertently, she glanced at him. Her eyes got stuck somewhere on the white uniform casuals, the sun blaze over the pocket, black hair and eyes and cleft golden jaw and the golden hands with their fine smoke of black hirsuteness. These she avoided. "I'm not," she said. "That is, there are so many people out there." She might have said lions, tigers. "Sure, I know," he said. He didn't know. People to him were a big fun game. "But I'll tell you what. You know when it gets really quiet in the Solarina?" "When?" whispered. He liked that. He understood what was happening. Fascinated by him, she was beginning to forget herself. 24 midnight by the earth clock below. Come back then. You'll get a good 3 or 4 hours, maybe alone. She didn't speak. "Or I might come up," he said. "Christ, Canna, what did I say to you?" He could see her breathing just like a heroine in an old romance. Bosom, as they said, heaving. "Why don't you drink your Champazira?" he said. I only ordered it for something to play with while you sat here," he said. "I didn't see you at dinner the last 2 night periods." "I ate in my cabin." "Oh, Miss Hartley. Apollonia, may I?" "Apollonia, you'll get the Pilgrim a bad name. You're supposed to get something out of your voyage. Come on now, promise me. The Solarina at midnight. I have to make certain our passengers enjoy themselves. You don't want me to lose my job, do you?" Startled, Her eyes flew up like birds and collided with his jet-black ones. Her whole face stained with color, even her spectacles seemed to glaze with pink. "I'll try." "Good girl." Good God. He told himself not to go up to the Solarina after midnight. Of course, he'd met women out there before who hadn't, but not women like Apollonia. At 24:30 by the Earth clock, he walked through the sun lounge. The passenger section of the ship was fairly still at this hour, as he had assured her. The Solarina was empty except for its flora and its light. In the sun lounge, Apollonia was huddled on her couch, without even the Shempazira to keep her company. "I didn't think you would come. I was," she said, "afraid to go through on my own. Is it all right?" "Sure it is." "Will the doors open?" "I have a tab if they don't." "It looks so bright, so fierce." "Yeah, it's like a hot shower or the sea at Key Mariano. You ever been there?" He knew she had not. "Just above blood heat. The fish cook as they swim. Come on." She didn't move, so he moved in ahead of her into the glowing summer, sloughing his robe as he went. He understood perfectly what he looked like in swim trunks. If he hadn't, enough women had told him, using the analogies of Greek heroes, Roman gladiators. "The harmful rays are filtered out by the solarine mechanism," he said. Encouraged, mesmerized, she slipped through, and the wine water closed over her head. She wore a long, shapeless tunic, probably just as well. She would be nearly as shapeless underneath. "Will this do?" she said. "I didn't know what—" "That's fine. The filtered sun soaks through any material. The tan is all over, whatever you wear. I just like to get directly under the spotlight when I can." They folded themselves out among the palms, which threw down coffee-green papers of shade. The warmth was honey. You felt it osmose into you. You never grew bored with it. The walls of the bubble, sun amber hiding the actual roaring face of the sun, pulsed very faintly, rhythmically, sensually, with solarine ingestation. The galleon was a child given suck by a fiery breast. All this to fuel a ship. Man, oh man. "It's beautiful," Apollonia said. She lay on palm frond shadows. Her eyes were wide behind the spectacles. Her putty-colored hair was ambiguously tinged, almost gilded. Her lips were parted. He hadn't noticed before. She had a nice mouth, the upper lip chiseled, the lower full and smooth, the teeth behind them even and white. He leaned over her and gently lifted the spectacles off the red groove in her nose. He was completely aware of the cliché, "Oh, Miss Hartley, now I see you for the first, without your glasses." She made a futile, panicky little gesture after the spectacles. "Relax," he said. She relaxed, closing her eyes. "I can see, but not so well, but I can see without them." "I know you can." "I never felt the sun, any sun like this before," she said presently. He saw it often, every journey in fact, how they grew drunken, wonderful solar drunks with no morning after. An hour later, 1:30 Earth time, he looked at her again. There was something changed. Already her skin was altered. Long lashes lay like satin streaks against her face. The red groove had faded, become a thin rose crescent. "Okay, Canna, so you're Pygmalion." But the Solarina sun had got to him also, as it always did. He leaned over again, and this occasion he kissed her lightly on the lips. "Oh," she said softly. "Oh." baby," he said. "I have to go back to my quarters and put on tape for my captain what 976 people find wrong with SSG Pilgrim this trip." She didn't stir. He thought she'd gone to sleep, perhaps fanciful, melodramatically passed out at a fragile kiss. He left her to the Solarina, and when he closed the door of his cabin, he found himself carefully locking it, and the sweat between his shoulder blades had nothing to do with the sun. He didn't see Miss Hartley next day period. This was partly deliberate and partly luck. There were plenty of things to do, reports to make, 2 hours workout in the gym. Then some crazy dame lost a ruby pendant. He took a late dinner in the salon. As PL, he had a place at the coordinator's table alongside his flock. The golden wash was spreading over them all, just as usual. Then he saw the girl. Something had happened to the girl. She was tanned, of course, enough tan that she must have been back to the Solarina during the day, or else she'd stayed there all night, or maybe both. But it wasn't only the tan. What the hell was it? He couldn't stop staring, which was bad because any moment she might look his way, but she didn't look. She wasn't even wearing her spectacles. She finished the tawny liqueur she was drinking, got to her feet, and walked unhurriedly out of the salon. She didn't move the same way, either. "I don't remember that girl," said Fourth Officer Coordinator Jeans. "Apollonia Hartley." "Not the right mixture for you, Canna." "Help yourself," said Canna. After dinner, there was the report to make on the rediscovery of the lost pendant. It looked like it was going to be one of those runs with a lot of desk work. Around midnight, there was cold beer and nothing much left to do except wonder if little Miss Hartley was on the sundeck. There were girls, and there were girls. Some girls you had to be wary of. Even birds of passage could turn around and fly straight back. And some had nest building on their minds, and some had damn sharp claws. This girl now, she might be grateful. She might have taken it for what it was. Then again, she might not. And for God's sakes anyway, what was there for him to be interested in? At 1 o'clock, Earth time, Canna went up to the Solarina. No robe and trunks now, but the rumpled uniform casuals he'd had on all day. The sun lounge was empty. Canna went to the entry out and glanced through the gold leaf tunnels of shine under the Lizardia. Miss Hartley was lying face down on a recliner about 30 meters away, her hair poured over onto the ground. He couldn't see her that well through the stripes of the palms, but enough to know that, aside from her hair, she was naked. He stepped away from the entry out noiselessly and walked soft all the way back to his cabin. "Oh boy, Canna." "You're beautiful," he said to the plain woman. Her face kindled. She opened her mouth and swallowed him whole. 10 o'clock next day period, Jeans's jowly face appeared on the cab comm. "Priority meeting, all officers, non-bridge personnel. Half an hour, bridge annex." "What's going on?" Canna asked. "Search me." "No thanks." "Okay, funny guy. Usual spiel to the mob, okay?" "Sure thing." Usual spiel was, as ever, necessary. Somehow your passengers always knew when something was up, however mild, however closely guarded. Passing 3 groups en route topside, Canna was asked what emergency required a bridge annex meeting. Usual spiel meant, "No emergency, Mr. Walters. Pilgrim always has an annex meeting 3rd day of sun parking." "But surely if everything is going smoothly—" "Nothing ever goes quite smoothly on a vessel this size, Miss Bonick." Then there is an emergency, Mr. Canna. Yes, Mr. Walters, we're all out of duck pate. Sit down, gentlemen, if you will, said Anderson. He had been captain of the Pilgrim since Canna had started with the ship, and Canna guessed he respected the man about as much as he'd ever respected any extreme authority. At least Anderson didn't think he was a god, and at least he sometimes got off his tail. Gentlemen, said Anderson, we have a slight problem. I'm afraid, Mr. Canna, yours, as ever, is going to be the delicate task. You mean it involves our passengers, sir? As ever, Mr. Canna. May I know what the problem is? We have some excess radiation, Mr. Canna. There was the predictable explosion, followed by the predictable dumb show that greets the distant tolling of that bell, about which ask not for whom. Spake, bridge engineer galleon class, waited for the bell. With your permission, sir? Okay, gentlemen, it's not big business. We have it under control. Every cubic centimeter of this tub is being checked. You mean, said Jeans, you don't know the hell where it's coming from? Anderson said, we know where it isn't coming from. The meton is sound, and there's no bleed-off from the casings. That's our only source of internal radiation, ergo it can't be us. Therefore it's coming in from outside, from the sun we're parked over. As yet we don't know how or where because every shield register's fully operational. According to topside computer, there's no way we can have a rad bleed at all. So naturally we're double-checking, triple-checking until we pin the critter down, even if we can't figure it, and there's no reason to suppose we eventually can't. All we have to do is weigh anchor and move out of sun range. Meantime, and here, Mr. Canna, is the rub, the most obvious danger is the Solarina. Canna groaned. What you're saying, sir, is that we're going to put the Solarina off limits to the passengers, and I have to find some reason for it that won't cause an immediate panic. You know what passengers are like when radiation is involved, said Anderson. Mention the word and they're howling and clawing for the life launches, said Jeans. What's the rad level? Canna asked. Engineer Spake looked at the captain, got some invisible go-ahead, and answered, At 3 o'clock this morning, 0.010. At 9 o'clock, 0.0210. There was a second round of expletives. In other words, it's rising? It appears to be, but we have a long way to go before it reaches anything like an inimical level. I guess that's topside's hang-up, not mine, said Canna. My hang-up is what story I tell lower side. Just keep it simple, Mr. Canna, if you would. The simplicity isn't what's troubling me, sir. You'll think of something, Mr. Canna. At noon, by the earth clock, when 900-odd persons were shooed from the Solarina, Canna guided them into the major lower side salon and told them about the free drinks courtesy of Pilgrim. Then, standing on the rostrum with the hand mic, gazing out at the pebbled beach effect of cluster on cluster of grim, belligerent, nervous faces, Canna found himself reviewing the half a dozen times he had been required to make similar overtures. The time the number 20 Solarine ingester caught fire, the time they hit the meteor swarm coming up from Alpheus. A couple of those and a .0210 radiation reading was a candy bar. And then he remembered the girl, and for 5 seconds his eyes ran over the crowd, and when he couldn't find her, he wondered why the mic was wet against his palm. They were making a lot of noise, but they quieted down when he lifted his hand. He explained, apologetically, humorously, that Pilgrim needed to make up a fuel loss caused by a minor failure, now compensated in one of the secondary ingesters. Due to that, the ship would be channeling off extra power through the ship's main Solarine area, the sun deck, hence the closure. For which inconvenience, folks, we are truly sorry. Now came the questions. A beefy male had commandeered one of the floor mics. "Okay, mister, how long's this closure going to last?" "A day period, sir. Maybe a couple of days at most." "I paid good cash for this voyage, mister. The Solarena's the main attraction." "The beneficial solar rays permeate every part of the ship, sir, not only the Solarena. The Sundeck's function is mostly ornamental, but the company will be happy to refund any loss you feel you've suffered when we reach Lyra." "If the goddamn Solarena's only ornamental, how can closing it affect the ship's power?" "Well, that's kind of a technical query. The Solarene pipe ingestors run out over the hull, you recall, and the Solarena's banks are the nearest to outer surface." Okay. A pretty young woman mic'd from the other side of the room. "Is there any danger?" "Absolutely none, ma'am. We're just tanking up on gas." "Well, then, let's tank up," someone yelled, and the free drinking began in earnest. The Pilgrim had got off lightly, Canna thought. He met Jeans near the bar, downing a large double paint stripper. Grinning broadly for passenger benefit, Jeans muttered, "Guess what the number game was 10 minutes ago?" "Thrill me." Canna also grinning. "Full .1. "Great," said Canna. "And you know what?" grinned Jeans. "Still climbing." Far across the room there was a sort of eddy, a current of gold like a fish's wake in sunset water. He thought of a woman baking in the yellow-green cradle of the palms, her arms and her hair poured on the floor. "The max is 50, right?" "Right, Canna, right." The woman with the ruby was approaching. "Miss Keene? Kane? Cone?" "I think it's just lovely," she giggled to Canna. "These marvelous ships, and they still get caught with their pants down." She tried to buy him one of the free drinks. The golden current had settled, become a pool of molten air. Where the girl was, Apollonia. She dyed her hair the color of Benedictine. He couldn't be sure it was Apollonia, except there was nobody else who looked like her now, as none of them had looked like her before. When he escaped from his flock and got back to his cabin, a slim, sealed envelope had come in at the chute with the lower side stamp over it. Canna opened the envelope. "I waited for you." That was all she had written in rounded, over-disciplined letters. "I waited for you." "Sure you did, baby." He felt sorry for her, and disgusted. She'd improved herself. Perhaps he could palm her off on Jeans. No, he couldn't do that. He'd understood she was trouble the first moment. He should have left her alone. God knew why he hadn't been able to. At 4, Spake came through on the cabcom. "Thought you'd like to hear it officially. The count is now .1505. "Jesus, got a fix yet?" "Nothing. It's everywhere lower side, from the Solarena to the milk bar." "Not topside?" "Sifting through." "Then the source has to be down here." "According to the computer, nothing leaks, nothing's bleeding off, unless one of your sheep has a stash of plutonium tucked in his diapers. It's got to be coming in, but the shields are solid as a rock." "Maybe you're asking the computer the wrong questions." "Could be. Know the right ones?" "What does Anderson say?" "He wants another meet. All available personnel. Midnight +3. 3 in the morning?" "That's it, Canna. Be there. And Canna..." "What?" "Complete passenger drill tomorrow. Launches, suit-ups, the whole show." "That'll certainly lend an atmosphere of calm. I'll get it organized." Just then, the cabin lights faltered. The clear sheen of the solarine lamps went white, then brown, steadied, and flashed clear again. "What the hell did that?" Canna demanded, but Spake was gone. Somewhere there had been a massive drain-off of power. That could mean several things, none of them pleasing. Already he was spinning a story for the passengers, a switchover of batteries as the fabricated weak ingester was shut down. You stood there with the smoke billowing and the walls red-hot and screaming people everywhere, and you told them, "It happens every trip, it's nothing," and you made them believe it. Canna went out of the cabin, strolling toward the lower side salon, taking in the 3 TV theaters on the way. The flock came to him like filings to a magnet. He was amazed they'd noticed the lights faltering. It was only the spare ingester shutting down. They believed him. Makes you feel good, huh, Canna? But where was Canna when the lights went out? In the goddamn dark. He opened his eyes. It was 1:30, the cabin on quarter lamp. Over by the tape cabinet, fastened to its stanchions, the grotesque survival suit stood, blackly gleaming, like a monster from a comic rag. He'd been checking the suit for the demonstration tomorrow, and then laying on the bunk to snatch an hour's sleep before Anderson's meeting. What had awakened him? The door buzzer sounded again. That was what awakened him. 2/3 of the way to the door, he knew who it was and hesitated. Then he opened the door. There in the corridor stood Apollonia Hartley, but it was not the Apollonia Hartley who had come aboard at Bell. The whole corridor seemed to shine, to throb and glow and shimmer. Maybe that was just the effect of full light after quarter lamp. Then she stepped by him into his cabin, and the throbbing, glowing, shimmering shine came in with her. "I waited," she said quietly. "And then, when you didn't come, I realized you meant me to come here." "Did I?" She turned and looked at him. Without her glasses, there was a slight film across her eyes, making them large, enigmatic. Not seeing him quite so well seemed to make it easier for her actually to look at him. Her Benedictine golden hair hung around her, all around her, and all of her was pure gold, traced over by the briefest swimsuit imaginable, and she was beautiful, shaped out of gold by a master craftsman, Venus on a gold medallion. "You look fine," he said. "What have you done to yourself?" "Nothing," she said. "You've done this for me, Leon." He thought, Christ, no woman could make herself look like this in 2 days, not starting on the raw material Apollonia had started with, not even with the Solarina. "You," she said, "and the strange, wonderful sun. No man ever looked at me before, ever kissed me. I've never been this close to a sun." As she breathed, regularly and lightly, planes of fire slid across her waist, her breasts, her throat, and the cabin gathered to the indrawn breath, spilled away, gathered, spilled. "Can you let me into the Solarina, Leon?" she murmured. "I can do it this way, but it's better there." He tried to smile at her. "Sorry, the Solarina's out of bounds, Apollonia. Miss Hartley. Until—" "Leon," she said. When she spoke, the room was full of amber dust and the scent of oranges, peaches, apricots, and volcanoes blazed somewhere. Then she put her hand against his chest, flat and still, on the bare skin. Here he was, Leon Canna, with the best-looking lady he'd ever seen, and he was holding her at arm's length. He stopped holding her that way and held her a better way, and she came to him like flame running up a beach. Over by the cabinet, the black survival suit for tomorrow's drill rattled dully, as if sex vibrated the cabin. When he opened his eyes the next time, it was with a sense of missing hours. He felt dizzy, and the cab comm was bawling. The girl had gone. Canna! For some reason, no picture had come over to fit Spake's shouting. Yes, I'm sorry, I'm late for my very important date with the bridge, right? No, Canna. Canna, listen to me. The radiation count in your cabin is .42 and rising. Canna straightened himself, his eyes and brain focusing slowly. Canna, are you there, for Christ's sake? I'm here, Spake. We have a firework display over the panel here for the whole of lower side, centralized on your level, and through to the B entry out to the Solarina. Canna saw the suit, black as coal, against the wall. I've got a demo suit with me, Spake. Good, Canna. Get it on in 2 seconds flat. Don't make any bets. Canna, it's 42.09. 43, Canna. Why no alarms? Canna inquired as he shambled over to the survival suit, cracked it open, and began to load its myriad pounds onto himself. The alarms are out. Drained. This comm is working on emergency. Get suited up, then get as many of the passengers suited as you can. You've got about 10 minutes to do it before it goes above 50 in there. Oh, and Canna, with the power shrinkage, half the auto gears are jammed, including those of the bridge exit and the 7 lifts through from topside. That's why you're on your own. That's why we can't unpark this truck. Something's just eating up the Solarine, and we're glued over the bloody sun. Now he was a black beetle. The cask clacked shut, and he hit the suit shields, and they came on all around him. Did he fantasize the sudden coolness? His skin felt tender, blistered, but he forgot it. Beyond his cabin, everything was quiet. Innocently, the lower side of pilgrims slumbered or fornicated, unaware that death lay thick as powder on every eye and nostril, every limb and joint and pore. Yet the lights were flickering again, and presently somewhere a dim, far-off yelling arose, more anger than fear. The ship's insomniacs, God help them. He wasn't going to be in time, and then he ran at the door and it wouldn't shift. Spake, he said. I'm suited up, but I can't get the door open. But the comm was beginning to crackle. Through the crackle, Spake said to him excitedly, There's something happening in the Solarina. Yes, I have it on screen, sir. Spake, will you listen? The door... My God, Spake said in a hushed, low, reverent voice. It's a woman, and she's on fire. Canna stood in his cabin in the black coffin of the survival suit. He visualized Apollonia, her fingers in the pocket of his uniform casuals, the authorization tab, the entry out of the sun deck softly opening. He saw her as the bridge was seeing her, lifting her amber arms, her golden body into the glare of the topaz sun. And the sun was shining through her, and like the bush on the holy mountain, she was burning and yet not consumed. A shock of sound passed through the ship. From the suit it seemed miles of cold space away, and then he felt the wild, savage trembling like the spasm of an anguished heart. And the tapes and papers on his desk were smoking. The whole cabin was filling with steel blue smoke he couldn't smell, like the heat he couldn't feel. The screaming seemed to come all on one high, frozen note. 2,000 voices melted into one, as the ship bubbled like toffee in a pan. And then the screaming became in turn one with a long roar of light, a blinding rush of noise, and silence, and the dark. The third time he opened his eyes, he was in a black box with white stars stitched over it. A few bits of unidentifiable wreckage went by, lazy as butterflies. Vast distances below, Pilgrim's charred embers fell into the pinpoint of a sun. Automatically, Canna stabbed on the stabilizers in the suit that had saved his life, anchoring himself firmly to a point of nothing in space. The suit could withstand almost anything and had just proved as much. It had liquid food and water sufficient for several day periods, air for longer. It could probably even sing him some songs. He had only to wait and keep sane. Every time a ship died, a red signal lit up on every scan board from Earth to Andromeda. Someone would come. He had only to wait. If he could have got to any of his flock, he'd have had company. They had suits on the bridge, of course, but they'd had the jammed doors, too. And bridge was right over the meton reactor. Even a suit couldn't take that on. He drifted about the anchor point, using up any foul words he could think of, like candles. He started to hurt. As all survivors did, he stared at the stars and wondered about God. He thought about the pretty girl in the salon who had asked if there was any danger, and he cried. He thought about Apollonia Hartley, and then the pain came, and he started to scream. When the search ship found him 2 day periods later, his voice was a hoarse wire splinter from screaming, and he spat blood from his torn throat. Tape running. Thank you, Officer Canna. I think we're all in the picture. I should now like to analyze this vision, or would you prefer a short recess? No, sir, I'd like to get this finished. Very well. Whatever you wish. Officer Canna, I hope you'll forgive me when I say once again that this story is preposterous. Having heard your account firsthand, I fear I must go further. You've somehow managed to turn a naval tragedy into an exercise in masculine ego. This tale of yours, the man who tells the woman she's beautiful, at which she magically makes herself beautiful for him, can it really be that you credit, and expect us to credit, the notion that the sexual awareness you brought to this pathetic, rather unbalanced girl triggered in her an unconscious response so enormous that she attempted to make herself beautiful by absorbing and eventually fusing with a solar body, becoming a fireball that consumed the SSG Pilgrim? I don't know, sir. I only know what I saw and what I heard. But what did you see and hear, Officer Canna? You saw an ugly girl who, for some perverse reason, attracted you, who then prettied herself for you, tanning quickly, as do all travelers on the Solarine galleons, dyeing her hair, using a slimming machine, a girl who eventually offered herself to you. Coincidentally, there was a shield failure, which the computer of Pilgrim failed to localize. The computer may already have been affected by the loss of power from the Solarine system, hence its inability to identify the source of the trouble. A vicious circle ensues. The shield break degenerates the Solarine bank. The bank is unable to supply sufficient power to stem the break. On the other hand, assuming your bizarre hypothesis to be true, the computer should surely have traced the source. Do you agree, Officer Canna? A computer can't think on its own. You have to feed the right questions. Bridge was asking the computer to check for a specific leakage, in or out. Very well, I don't think we'll split any more hairs on that, Officer Canna. My comments on this phenomenon are amply recorded. The other phenomena you describe are due to the experience itself, but seen in the retrospect of your guilt. Excuse me, I don't like what happened, but I don't feel guilty. There was no way I could guess. When I did, there was nothing I could do. Perhaps not, but you were wasting precious hours with a female passenger when you might have been able to help your ship. I didn't know that at the time. Lastly, the woman on fire in the Solarina, by which garbled fragment you seem to set great store. With the radiation level where it was, and so near the outer surface of the ship as the sun deck, spontaneous combustion of tissue was not only possible, but predictable. Mr. Lyles? Yes, please speak. As the witness's counsel, Mr. Hoffman, I would respectfully draw your attention to the note appended to Leon Cana's written statement. This one, to do with the radiation burns over Officer Cana received? But I would have thought such burns inevitable. After all, the exposure, the rad level in the cabin before Leon Cana suited up was insufficient to cause burns of this magnitude. Well, I see, but what... Excuse me, Mr. Hoffman. Leon, are you sure you want to go through with this? I'm sure. Mr. Hoffman, I'm setting up here a view screen, and on the screen I'm going to present to this investigation 2 shots of Officer Cana taken before he underwent treatment and tissue regeneration. Lights, please. Thank you. Shot 1. A faint growl of men unaccustomed to seeing raw human flesh. Mr. Lyles, is this strictly... Yes, Mr. Hoffman, sir, and I'd ask you to look carefully here and here. Yes, Mr. Lyles, thank you. This is the frontal shot of Leon Cana's body. The second shot is of the hind torso and limbs. Silence. Loud exclamations. Silence. I think you will take my point, gentlemen, that what might be a curious abstract in the first shot becomes a rather terrifying certainty when compounded by the second. Silence. Mr. Lyles, Officer Cana, gentlemen, I think we must have a recess after all. Someone please stop that blasted tape. Tape stopped. Appendix. 2 photographs. First shot. A naked man about 36 years of age and of athletic, well-proportioned build, badly burned by a Class B radiation strike across the lower face, chest, arms, palms of the hands, pelvis, genitals, and upper legs. Second shot. The same man, also nude, hind view, burns of similar type but small in area and fragmentally scattered across the shoulders and buttocks. Across the middle to upper region of the back, definitely marked as if with branding irons, the exact outline of 2 female arms and hands, tightly and compulsively pressed into the skin.